It is 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Starving and desperate, the UK joins the effort to build a maritime corridor to help urgently needed aid reach Gaza. Pro-Palestinian activists have defaced a painting of Lord Balfour as a government advisor claims protests are turning London into a no-go zone for Jews. More lives lost than saved. The findings of a damning report into State Knife, the top British agent acting as a spy at the heart of the IRA.
The United Kingdom government should apologise to the Canova families for the failures of the security forces to protect the lives of their loved ones.
Also tonight, Prince William back leading the royal team as he visits the Oval Cricket Ground. The Oscars age gap, could Hollywood be turning a corner in the way it recognises and rewards female stars? And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 through to midnight. Good evening. As the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsens, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has confirmed the UK will be involved in an American-led operation to build a temporary port in the Strip and open a sea corridor from Cyprus. The US has been dropping aid by air in recent days and this evening has had to deny reports that as many as 5 people died earlier when one of their drops went wrong. Now, the World Food Programme says hunger has reached catastrophic levels in the north of Gaza. Many are suffering, and aid agencies say children are dying because of a lack of food. Now, 1 in 6 children under the age of 2 is acutely malnourished. The aid that is getting in is not adequate. Currently, around 150 trucks are entering the Strip each day. But the World Food Programme says a minimum of 300 per day are needed to meet people's most basic of needs. Now, at the moment, aid to Gaza can only be brought in through these 2 crossings in the south, the Rafah crossing and Kerem Shalom, with small amounts of aid being dropped by air. Now, the new plan will see Larnaca in Cyprus become a logistics hub for aid from around the world, with a temporary port built by the Americans off Gaza, likely near the current one in the north of the Strip. Our Middle East correspondent, Asda Bunkel, has our top story.
A week ago, 10-year-old Yazan Al-Kafana was being comforted by his mother at a hospital in Rafah. His face is gaunt, his eyes and cheeks sunken in hunger. He's almost too weak to cry out, but the pain is clear on his face. 3 days later, Yazan died, another victim of malnutrition in Gaza.
I lost my son due to malnutrition, due to the circumstances we're going through in Gaza. What are you expecting from a sick child living in such conditions? How can he get better?
America's plan to bring aid into Gaza by sea is another sign of growing frustration with its ally Israel and the prospect of widespread famine. One option could be something like this, a floating pontoon stretching some distance offshore into deeper waters and away from the threat of fighting on land. This is from a US exercise a few years ago, but experts say that it will take weeks to get it up and running. It is a medium-term solution to an immediate crisis.
I think it will take at least a couple of weeks, perhaps even 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's not that easy to get these. I think it will be mostly floating devices with anchors that you want to put there in front of the coast.
The aid will need to be received in a secure zone, and it will need organisations to distribute it to avoid scenes like these. Britain has now announced its involvement.
This new idea from the President of the United States, which we're involved in, of building a temporary harbour in Gaza, means that aid will be able to go directly from Cyprus to Gaza. But it's going to take time to build.
The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was in Cyprus today to inspect the port at Larnaca and said that a ship would sail to Gaza imminently. Food was being loaded up with the aim to land up to 200 pallets a day on Gaza's beaches.
Despite all the challenges, and this is truly inspiring, We're now very close to the opening of the corridor, hopefully this Saturday, this Sunday. And I'm very glad to see that an initial pilot operation will be launched today.
Aid drops continued over Gaza today, but it is inefficient and risky. Land crossings are, by far and away, the best way to get aid into Gaza in the quantities needed. But the international community says Israel must still do more. The chances of premature babies surviving in Gaza now is slim. They are kept alive in the few incubators still working, but their mothers are often unable to feed them, too malnourished themselves. Outside this small, rare bubble of hope, everyone else is fighting for survival. The weakest and smallest, as always, are the most vulnerable. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News.
Now, on the eve of another major march in London, a government advisor has claimed that London streets have become no-go zones for Jews during pro-Palestinian protests. The Counter-Extremism Commissioner, Robin Simcox, warned a permissive environment for radicalisation was developing and urged the government to be bolder in taking action. Here's our home editor, Jason Farrell.
A Jewish bakery in North London. They didn't want us to name it, fearful of anti-Semitism. Some customers here too say they wouldn't travel into central London on the day of a pro-Palestinian protest.
I would not go to London or go in any area that there are pro-Palestinian protesters.
I would tell people to avoid central London if they looked or sounded Jewish. Yes, definitely.
On the high street in Golders Green, we came across Israel's national police spokesman, Mickey Rosenfeld, in the UK to talk to officials here about Jewish security in Europe.
The threats have increased, but not just here in England and in London. The threats have increased all across Paris, as well as in Germany and other areas such as Brussels, where there's an increase of pro-Palestinian protests which are taking place, and that is something which should be worrying both to the local governments and communities as well as security forces.
Another large pro-Palestinian protest will flow through London streets on Saturday. And the extremist czar, Robin Simcox, says this is turning central London into a no-go zone for Jewish people. But Hackney MP Diane Abbott posted on X, time to nail these lies about Jews being frightened to come into London on pro-Palestinian march days, adding pictures showing Jewish people on the marches. Ahead of the Saturday demonstration, feminist groups were raising their voices for the women of Gaza to mark International Women's Day.
The people on the street are there because human beings are being slaughtered and murdered, starved to death. No aid is allowed in, no agreement on a ceasefire. The UK government is giving Israel arms and weapons. So instead of they're trying to shift focus on what they're doing and what they failed to do, and then link it up to a specific religion.
A group called Palestine Action shared a video on social media of a demonstrator vandalising a painting of Lord Balfour at Cambridge's Trinity College. As Foreign Secretary, he'd signed the Balfour Declaration in 1917, favouring the establishment in Palestine of a national home for Jewish people. Some groups involved in all kinds of protests will be waiting in anticipation for a move by the government next week to change the definition of extremism, which could include anyone promoting an ideology that undermines British values.
It's absurd, the comments that are coming out of the Conservative Party with Rishi Sunak standing there trying to undermine the democratic process, the democratic right of people to protest against a genocide.
It's not yet clear who the new definition will affect or the impact it will have, but it's likely to be another factor in this debate for weeks to come.
And Jason joins me now. Jason, it's great to have you. So this is the first major protest since the Prime Minister talked about mob rule replacing democratic rule.
Yeah, that's right. It's the 10th national protest march through London, but it is the first time since Rishi Sunak made that speech where he said democracy itself is under threat. And you can boil it down really to two concerns that he raised. One is the type of protest that we're seeing now. So he was talking about MPs' houses being targeted, councils being targeted and institutions. But then he was also talking about the type of people who were going on those protests. And his warning to the protesters was, he said, don't let extremists hijack hijack your marches. And then we heard from the extremism czar today saying that these marches are becoming no-go areas for Jewish people. And the problem, I suppose, is that in some ways adds to the grievances of the people on the march, because now they feel that they are being labelled as extremists. They feel that their democratic rights are being challenged. Many of them already believe that the government is Islamophobic. And as Diana pointed out in that tweet, there are Jewish people who go on these marches. They are multicultural and they are multi-faith, just as the Jewish bakery that I was in today is also multicultural and multi-faith. And they worry that the government is causing division. When you go to the Jewish communities, I think they are worried about the protests. They do say, they don't like the slogans, they feel it's anti-Semitic. But I think they're more worried about their communities. Mm-hmm. They're more worried about what's happening, what might happen in the future, their businesses, their schools, and general security. They don't want division either.
Absolutely not. OK, Jason, for now, thank you very much for that. Now, an investigation into a British agent who was a top spy inside the IRA has concluded that his actions probably resulted in more lives being lost than saved. Freddie Scappaticci, who was codenamed Steak Knife, led an IRA unit responsible for abducting and killing people who were suspected of being informants. The 7-year investigation found the security forces were frequently aware of imminent abductions and murders, but failed to protect those at risk. Our senior island correspondent David Blevins reports now from Belfast.
This is Freddie Scappaticci, an IRA enforcer turned British spy, the golden goose of agents, according to one defence chief. But a 7-year investigation found that more lives were lost than saved by the mole they codenamed Steak Knife, a damning indictment of intelligence gathering.
It put lives at risk, it left those on the front line exposed and let down, and it fostered a maverick culture for some, where agent handling was sometimes seen as high stakes, dark art, and was practised off the books.
The report calls on the UK government and the Republican movement to apologise, the onus falling on the First Minister.
I am sorry for all the lives lost during the conflict, without exception. Regrettably, the past cannot be changed or cannot be undone. Neither can the suffering, the hurt, or the political violence of conflict be disowned by Republicans or indeed by any other party to the conflict.
Scappaticci ran the IRA's so-called Nutting Squad, rooting out alleged informants for torture and murder. Unmasked in 2003, he denied the claims.
I'm telling you, I'm not guilty of any of these allegations.
But couldn't escape the headlines in Belfast and entered witness protection in England, where he died last year. Freddie Scappaticci exemplified the dirty war between the IRA and British intelligence, a murky world of espionage where some turned a blind eye to murder, dark secrets that Steak Knife has taken to his grave. Sandra Peake, who works with bereaved families, says they live with the shame of having their loved ones labelled traitors.
I mean, I've often said, David, that when your loved one is killed at the hands of the other community, support is often there. But when your loved one's killed at the hands of people within your own community and with a label, it becomes a stigmatised death, and that's something which is very difficult for families to deal with.
A lawyer for relatives says it's clear the state and IRA conspired together to murder.
Today's report presents as a damning indictment on the state. The staggering takeaway message is that the state could have and should have intervened to save lives. That this didn't happen is legally and morally reprehensible.
And the 200 pages leave one question unanswered. How much has changed in terms of how British intelligence operates now? David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
Now, last weekend, a 7-year-old girl called Rua became the latest victim of the perilous journey across the Channel to try and reach the UK. The migrant boat that she and her family were travelling in capsized in northern France. The little girl was one of 16 passengers on board. Now, despite their personal tragedy, her family says they will attempt to cross again. They've been speaking to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons.
Rua was 7 years old. Her life spent moving through Europe on a long journey towards the UK, a journey that ended with her death.
She was beautiful. I lost her from my hands, my little princess. She was 7 years old. She'd seen nothing in this world. We wanted to make their lives better.
Rua's family had paid a people smuggler to take them to Britain, but the boat capsized and Rua drowned.
Those peoples are criminals. They do not see humans as humans. They only see money. They treat humans like objects. They have no morals, ethics, or humanity.
Bewildered in grief, Rua's 3 brothers.
She was very dear to us, but she's gone now. And I want her to come back, but she won't.
This wasn't a normal channel crossing attempt. The family had boarded a small, stolen riverboat 12 miles inland from the French coastline. Collecting her body from a morgue, Rua's family dreading the farewell to come. As they left, Rua's small wooden coffin followed behind. There was little time to linger. Muslim tradition dictates burials must take place before sunset.
We often talk about the dangers of cross-channel migration, that this is what it looks and feels like when things go terribly wrong. A bereaved, devastated family, a local community trying to offer solace, and at the heart of it, the grave of a 7-year-old girl.
Her family say they are hollow with grief, but that they still plan on getting to Britain, and that will mean another smuggler and another dangerous boat. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Dunkirk.
Now, in the year that will see him go head-to-head with Donald Trump once again, Joe Biden has made his pitch to American voters in the State of the Union address. The 81-year-old made light of his age, saying, "I know I may not look like it, but I've been around a while," addressing one of the main concerns that voters have. But what did they make of it? Our US correspondent James Matthews has been finding out.
Reflections the morning after on the president's big speech. How it flew and how it landed. We cross the river from the Capitol Hill venue to Gravelly Point. They spot planes here. How did they view the speech?
I thought he did a good job. I think he did what he needed to do. I think he needed to come out with some fire in his belly and stand up to the doubters.
I figure when he gives a somewhat coherent speech that he's either reading off the teleprompter or listening in his ear. If you ask him questions, like sort of impromptu in a press conference or something, I mean, he can't string 2 words together.
I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Biden. As a Democrat and progressive, I think there's a lot he still has to do to earn my vote, particularly when it comes to the Middle East and the situation in Gaza. But I think he put a lot of concerns to rest last night. I was really impressed. I know he's the president, but last night was the first time that I really felt him presidential.
The night before had seen protest outside the Capitol building prior to the State of the Union address. Inside, it was billed as make or break.
I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while.
For a president facing questions over his age and mental sharpness.
We have to stand up to Putin. I know you know how to read. My God, what freedom else would you take away? We stopped you 50 times before and we'll stop you again.
Democrats holding their breath breathed a little easier.
He was strong, he was forceful, he was clever.
Doug Thornell is a party strategist.
You know, we don't have prime minister's questions like the UK does, but this was the closest thing I've seen to that in a while, and he excelled at it.
Biden's opponents criticised him, claiming he'd used the forum for a campaign speech. It won't worry Biden supporters. His is a campaign too often with a message undermined by the messenger. James Matthews, Sky News, in Gravelly Point.
Now, the Metropolitan Police officer charged with murdering 24-year-old Chris Cabba in South London has been named as Martin Blake. The 40-year-old shot Mr Cabba through a car windscreen. He's pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder and is expected to stand trial in October. Security forces in Nigeria have launched an operation to find at least 287 schoolchildren kidnapped by gunmen. It's the second mass abduction in less than a week there, after more than 200 people, mostly women and children, were kidnapped and ransoms were demanded. Theresa May says she will stand down at the next general election. The 67-year-old MP for Maidenhead was Britain's second female Prime Minister and has been in Parliament for 27 years. Rishi Sunak described her as a relentless campaigner and as defining what it means to be a public servant. The Duchess of Sussex has spoken about the online abuse she has suffered at a conference discussing the importance of representation in the media industry. During the talk, which marked International Women's Day, Meghan spoke about her personal experience.
The bulk of the bullying and abuse that I was experiencing in social media and online was when I was pregnant with Archie and with Lily and with a newborn with each of them. And you just think about that and to really wrap your head around why people would be so hateful. It's not catty, it's cruel.
Now, it's been another challenging week for the royal family, with speculation continuing about the health of the Princess of Wales and confusion after the Ministry of Defence appeared to mistakenly announce her return to work. But to date, Prince William has been front and centre, carrying out public royal duties as he visited the Oval in South London. And Prince Edward was also out and about. It's his 60th birthday, and he was celebrating with his wife, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, reports.
The Oval cricket ground sits on his land. Welcome territory then for Prince William after much unwelcome speculation. The MOD messing up this week, mistakenly announcing Kate's return to work. So this is William's attempt to refocus attention.
And you haven't seen me back yet, all bowled, so it's very brave of you to give me that.
Here, celebrating Earthshot, his environmental awards, and a prize winner's deal to supply sustainable packaging to sporting venues.
It smells good in here.
The Oval, one of 50 stadiums where food will be served in seaweed-based boxes. The Prince of Wales, we're told, personally working to secure the deal.
These remain really challenging times for the royal family. Prince William wants to be talking about Earthshot, sustainability, the deal being done here. But it's hard to be heard when the royal rumour mill is running overtime.
They can but carry on. And from the Oval to Headingley, Edward and Sophie in Leeds for a sporting awards presentation. Their working roles more prominent than ever. But time, too, for a very personal message for the Duke of Edinburgh.
I'm so proud of the man he is. He is the best of fathers, the most loving of husbands, and is still my best friend. So here's to you, my darling Edward. And may I, along with all of your family and so many friends and so many others, wish you the happiest of birthdays.
It's rare to hear the royal speak like this. Prince Edward turns 60 this weekend.
1, 2, 3, go! Thank you very much indeed. I've got to go now.
And Sophie's touching tribute, an emotional start to his celebrations. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Now, the Oscars, the biggest night of the year in Hollywood, are to be held on Sunday. And this International Women's Day, Sky News analysis has revealed a large gap that's existed for decades between the average age of male and female winners in the acting categories. From Los Angeles, Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
A land of airbrushed perfection. Hollywood has always had an issue with ageing, reflected in who wins what here. At the Oscars, typically it's been the young female ingenue rewarded, while the men alongside them get to mature like fine wines.
I can tell even if I can't see, and I heard the word fat, and ugly.
No one but me would dare, and I did not.
The invisibility of middle-aged women on screen, not lost on 2019's winner.
I don't stop watching telly once I'm 31, or films, or stories, or theatre. I still want to watch.
Yeah.
And although you don't pay us as much, we still have some clout. So don't underestimate women.
But could the industry finally be turning a corner? Those still able to move an eyebrow might well want to raise one at Sky News' analysis of the Oscars acting categories this year. Take the average age of male winners over the decades and put them next to the women, and note that crossover. Because of wins for older women at recent ceremonies, cemented last year with Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis winning, who are both in their 60s, it's meant the average age gap has closed for the first time. Technically, taken this year alone and not the decade average, if winners go as predicted, there'll still be an acting age gap of 16.5 years. But that's still way better than what was repeatedly going on in the 90s and noughties. Take the year 2000, for instance, when between Hilary Swank and Angelina Jolie, Kevin Spacey and Michael Caine, the average age gap was 29 years. Jodie Foster has experienced it all. A nominee aged 14, winning twice before she was 30.
What you want to do has never been done.
And especially not for a woman.
Now, over 30 years later, she's up for an Oscar again for a film about endurance swimmer Diana Nyad.
The world of complexity hasn't always been reserved for women. You know, we were the mother of, the sister of, the prostitute of. You know, it has taken a lot of work by women to flesh out female characters in the industry over time.
While it's too early to say for certain whether Hollywood's ironed out the wrinkles in its age gap problem, taking the overall picture by decade, for the first time, progress. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in our press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the PR consultant Alex Dean and the columnist for The Guardian, Zoe Williams. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this story on the front of the Eye. Budget falls flat as Tories lose votes to reform. Stay with us, we'll be right back. welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Foreign Secretary has confirmed the UK will be involved in an American-led operation to get aid to Palestinians in Gaza using a temporary port. Pro-Palestinian activists have defaced a painting of Lord Balfour, who is linked to the creation of Israel, as a government advisor claims protests are turning London into a no-go zone for Jews. An investigation into a British agent inside the IRA known as Steak Knife has concluded his actions probably resulted in more lives being lost than saved. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making headlines with the PR consultant Alex Dean and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Thanks both. So let's see what's on some of those front pages, and we'll start with the Telegraph, which reports Scotland's First Minister is being accused of a conflict of interest for giving aid to an agency in Gaza while his family was trapped there. The I's headline: Budget falls flat as Tories lose votes to reform. The Mail says former Defence Secretaries have backed their campaign for a cash boost for the UK's armed forces. The Daily Express says that Queen Camilla will be in attendance at the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey on Monday. The Times speaks to the mothers of two students who were fatally stabbed in Nottingham and are accusing the police and the CPS of failing them. The Guardian runs an exclusive on private hospitals carrying out a tenth of all planned NHS operations. The Financial Times leads with central bankers in Europe and the United States sensing victory over the biggest inflation surge in a generation. A former Spice Girl voices support for Jerry following her husband, Christine Horner's recent issues. That's on the front of the Mirror. And The Sun writes about a lottery winner who's kicked out her husband after he blew millions from their £148 million fortune. And for those who want to get rid of their beer bellies, The Star says all you need to do is eat less calories for 5 days a month. That's excellent advice. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch along with us. So tonight we're joined by Alex Dean and Zoe Williams. Welcome both. Thank you very much for giving up your Friday evenings to spend it with us. Let's get straight on a look at the tomorrow morning's newspapers, and we'll start with the Daily Telegraph, Alex. And this is Humza Yousaf, maybe in a bit of trouble over money given to an aid agency.
He concedes that he overruled official advice in directing £250,000 of taxpayers' money to go to UNRWA. I may have a position that surprises you slightly on the principle of this. I think people who are elected should overrule people who are unelected more often. I think that's something that should happen because elected people are accountable to us, and if we disagree with their decisions, we can vote against them. And if people in Scotland think Humza Yousaf did the wrong thing here, the opportunity is obvious for them at the next election to express that view. That said, on the principle, I'm fine with him determining where money goes, if that's the decision he's being asked to take. The question is whether it was actually a good idea to give money to UNRWA rather than, as might have been an option, UNICEF more broadly, water organisations or other routes. And on that, because of UNRWA's alleged recent involvement with Hamas, he might be on different ground.
It's worth just going back before we get your opinion on this. Humza Yousaf's family were trapped in Gaza for weeks.
It was an absolutely horrible time. The wife's parents had gone back to visit other family members and they'd got trapped in the middle of the October the 7th aftermath. And it was so painful to watch. I can remember him giving a press conference because it was just the bombardments as they started were so close to him personally, and he was so distressed. And I kind of feel like they're coming after him now for a donation to UNRWA, which everybody was making. You know, the British government makes significant donations to UNRWA, and they stopped doing so when Israel lodged their accusation that it was kind of full of Hamas operatives, but actually,
I think about 12 people as well.
Well, but you know, Cameron said today, or maybe yesterday even, that he wanted to go back on that decision, and for the UK government to take up donations again to UNRWA. So they're clearly a really fundamental agency, and I think he may have made a decision in the rush of the moment, but I don't think he was doing it to protect his own family, certainly not. And I don't think that it was a bad decision.
No, I don't. Other people have alleged, and it's alleged in this story, so the allegation is made in this story that he was acting under some kind of conflict of interest because of his family situation. I don't make that allegation at all. The trouble for him, as the Telegraph sets out, is the timing, because he makes the decision to give the donation on November the 2nd, and the family's released on November the 3rd, and that's unattractive in the way that people see it.
Yeah, the TikTok might not sound great to people. And this is a donation that's come from the Scottish Government as well. That's important.
Correct.
As well, right? This is
it's not his. Yeah, it's not his money.
But
He can do what he likes with that.
It's an official amount of money that's come from the Scottish Government for this aid agency.
Yeah, but you know, it's certainly not out with the bounds of possibility for all countries to be donating significant amounts to
Sure, but
UNRWA.
at this time, the rest of the UK government had suspended payments to that organisation. That's the point.
Yeah, but they think that was a mistake now. Cameron thinks that was a mistake to suspend them.
Yeah, but he had no right to know that at the time, did he? Yusuf didn't know that the UK government might reverse their position.
No, but also people did have different opinions on it at that point as well. And I mean, look, it's a story that's definitely going to have another shoe to drop, I think, on it when we
I
agree.
across the next couple of days. All right, let's move on to the next story. Still connected with the situation in Gaza. We'll talk about the reporting on the front of the Telegraph, I think, to start with. And this is about this opening of this maritime corridor, isn't it? I mean, from my recollection, this has been talked about since this war began, that they were going to try and bring aid in from Cyprus, and it seems as if they've finally got the...
I mean, Cameron does seem to have got really serious today and yesterday, because this is not... calling on Israel to open the port and calling on the emergency port is only the third of 3 interventions. He also called for, I think, 200 trucks to be going in a day, when at the moment there are only 50.
Yeah.
And he also, of course, started to row back on the UNRWA decision. So I think he's taking a serious look at what's on the ground, unlike, actually, the kind of overall messaging coming out of Sunak is just trailing the Americans. Whereas, I don't know, maybe the Americans are kind of shifting their position and Cameron is trailing them too, but I get the impression that Cameron has actually had enough of...
Well,
speaking of different voices, do you think, Alex?
Well, first of all, yes, and he's got a senior figure as his foreign secretary. Let your foreign secretary do his job isn't a bad idea. But secondly, I think you and I might differ about the American position. I think it's quite clear, whatever your views of the Israel-Palestine situation, President Biden ran out of patience with, and the Biden administration ran out of patience with Israel's position some time ago. And so I don't think it's just, it's very slowly following the American... The American position was set out some time ago.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you were getting very strong messaging coming out of American foreign affairs, but Biden could very easily have just picked up the phone to Netanyahu and said this is unacceptable. But instead of doing that, he was continuing to arm the Israelis even while he was hand-wringing about the bombardments.
So he was giving some
very mixed messages.
If you were the American president, you made that call and it didn't work, you wouldn't tell anyone, right? So that's the issue.
Lots of the rhetoric, lots of pleas for the Israelis to act in a different way. We're full and entirely...
No, but listen, if the Americans... Because basically, an American, it wouldn't be a plea. It would be, you have to stop doing this or we stop arming you.
Well,
and they haven't stopped arming them.
This is the point, isn't it? It hasn't got to that point yet, but it does seem from all of the talk as if that line is being set for them to reach, and whether or not they reach that yet, we will find out soon, but this is in train. Let's move on to another story, and this is the budget. With the budget this week, if you can remember, a couple of days ago. Let's look at the front page of the Eye. Budget falls flat as Tories lose votes to reform. What do you make of this, Alex?
Well, of course, Reform Party, I think, will be very unlikely to win a single seat at the next general election, but they don't have to win a single seat to do real harm to the Conservative Party and its prospects, not just of forming government, but of, being a surviving, plausible opposition in the House of Commons. And the speculation here in the Eye, although we haven't seen the inside yet, the speculation is that the government had, to a certain degree, hung its hopes on a successful budget in media reception terms and public reception terms, and their polling suggests that's not come about.
Yeah, and so what did you make of the budget, of this reporting? Do you think that what we heard in the budget could have been enough for the Tories to pull themselves out of the hole that they're in.
A, no. B, what could have been enough? I mean, you just look at that budget and how insufficient it was. A lot of it is merely kind of signalling. So taking 2p off national insurance is kind of signalling that you're the kind of person who doesn't really like national insurance. And I think you're
don't
right.
like national insurance. So.
Well, that's great. Maybe you should stand and be destroyed in the general election. No, I'm joking.
I would make the point that national insurance is basically another form of tax.
I don't want you to be destroyed. No, I mean, I don't mind tax, so I don't mind it being another form of tax. But the point is...
But it's a dishonest one.
No, it doesn't matter.
We're not going to talk about the whys and wherefores of tax
because the thing is, it's not going to make any difference to anybody's lives. It makes a small amount of difference around the 50 grand.
It's a real difference.
No, at the lowest...
And if you're going to talk about the budget, you do need to talk about the whys and wherefores of tax.
But at the lowest level, at the lowest incomes, at the level of destitution, this will make no difference whatsoever, and a huge number of people are destitute.
It'll make a big difference to a lot of working people.
Enormous. Well, you know, anybody serious about living standards in this country is worried about the very large numbers of people who can't make ends meet, right? And that's what this budget hasn't addressed at all.
Yeah, OK, but the point was whether or not that cuts to tax was going to do anything for the electoral prospects. I think we can agree that it probably is not going to. But where tax is used and can help is in defence spending, and this is the front of the Mail, and they are desperate for defence spending to be increased, as many other people are.
Do you want to take a guess at which former defence secretaries, and then when we find out, we can bet each other?
Yeah, it's frustrating not to know which ones they are. I think the campaign would have a good deal more force if it's bipartisan, if they are people from different political parties backing this call for more defence spending. But on the one hand, if you get the kind of institutional capture of becoming the advocate for your department and that becomes a habit in you, and you fail to see the broader picture of government spending, people might criticise you. On the other hand, I really like the way that people become committed to their departments and advocate for them, even after the time that they are in office. And from my own perspective, personally, I think it's unarguable that our armed forces are underfunded.
I mean, Dannant was on the... I'm only calling him Dannant, not because I'm disrespectful, but I can't remember how you're supposed to address previous...
Lord Dannant.
Lord
Is it? Surely he has a kind of Lord Admiral...
No,
special...
No, he's not. So, German academics are doctor or professor. He's not like that. I think he's just Lord Dannant now. Yeah.
OK, so anyway, he was calling yesterday for 3%, and I did smell the distinctive whiff of a coordinated march with some people out here and some people in the middle. So I think, you'd
hope they know how to organise themselves.
Well, exactly. And I think they do know how to organise themselves. And so I think 2.5 is the minimum they want, and they're just going to go and go.
That will be an increase, of course, and it's kind of undisputed that needs to be done. That money needs to be found to increase the funding for the armed forces.
It would be an increase, but it wouldn't be that big an increase, because unlike most countries that are in NATO, we've always met our NATO spending targets.
So what are we on now? Are we on 2?
Like 2 and a bit.
OK.
Right, so from 2 to 2.5, OK, it's an uplift.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a meaningful uplift, it probably does have to be 3.
OK, quick chat about the Telegraph, and this is Andrew Bailey, if we can. What do you tell us about this one?
Yeah.
Inflation beating pay rise for bank staff.
He really doesn't... Andrew Bailey really doesn't have Mark Carney's kind of easy charm. He just, Mark Carney seemed to never get into trouble, however difficult the thing he was saying was. And Andrew Bailey seems to get in trouble with literally everything. So it was about 6 months ago, or maybe even more, that he blamed the cost of living crisis on low-paid workers asking for too much money.
Don't ask for money, he said.
He didn't say low-paid wages. He asked the country to not seek. He asked us to exercise pay restraint.
But that was... given his pay, given his pay, it made everybody choke on their... they were eating.
The point of the story is that at the same time they were planning to give pay rises to the staff at the Bank of England. Right? That's the issue.
Although no, this is today's news, right?
No, but you don't give a salary rise on the day, right? There's a run up to it.
Okay.
And he must have known that they were going to give their staff salary rises. You don't determine it overnight.
The thing is, it is, to be fair to him, 4% isn't a huge amount. It used to be quite normal to get that kind of pay rise on an annual basis.
Alex, Zoe, thanks both. Plenty more to come from you two after the break, where we'll be looking at some of the other stories making the papers tomorrow, including this one on the front of the Mail, highlighting Meghan Markle's claim that the worst kind of online abuse is women attacking other women. Stay with us.
I think that when we're looking across history, that empires are a fundamental part of our history. They were the fundamental part of world order. And if we're thinking about this within the wider context, King George III himself in the 1750s argued for the abolition of slavery. He argued that it was immoral. We know that Queen Victoria, for example, was incredibly kind to the Muslim community in the United Kingdom. And so ultimately, when we're looking throughout history, it's very difficult to actually make these specific arguments for who should be paying reparations. I'm half Moroccan. Should the Moroccan kingdom be paying reparations to Cornish people for the Barbary slave trade? It's very difficult to actually pin down where these arguments should be lying and actually where these reparations or these apologies should be kept.
King Charles, this is the man who is obviously head of state, head of the Church of England, and ultimately decided to commission the first monarch to commission a report into the royal family's links into the slave trade. So this is a man who was very much centred around equality, right? So this is a good thing. In terms of who should pay it, that's ultimately your point. Well, it starts with King Charles, let's just be clear. The monarchy advocated and benefited from the slave trade. We're talking 3.4 million people that were transported from the African continent into the Americas and the Caribbean, 450,000 of which died during the process. Monarchy advocated and benefited from that. We also have the fact that the slave owners were compensated, so people like you, people like me, paid as taxpayers for the slave owners' declaration or agreement that was sorted out 400 years ago. In the past.
King Charles is not personally responsible. Nobody today is personally responsible for the slave trade. And I hear your point, and I hear the fact that racism still exists today, and many of the institutional difficulties that we see today stem from these historical grievances.
Yes, thank you.
However, nobody today caused the slave trade.
Yeah.
Nobody alive today financially benefits from the slave trade today. And so I think it's incredibly, I think, disingenuous to actually look at these arguments and actually say that we can trace back exactly who benefited, where benefited.
But we can.
No, we cannot.
Hello there and welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, the PR consultant Alex Dean, and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. We're going to take a look through some of the morning's newspapers again, but just before we went to break, we were talking about that story on the front of the Telegraph about Humza Yousaf having donated £250,000 to an aid agency in Gaza. Well, the Scottish Government have responded to that Telegraph story, saying that UNRWA had no role in the situation regarding the First Minister's extended family, and any suggestion of a conflict of interest in this matter would be completely untrue and simply a regurgitation of ludicrous far-right conspiracy theories to be found online. The Scottish Government coming out strongly, refuting that story on the front of the Telegraph. I think that story has got more to run. All right, let's carry on, guys, and we're going to look, I think, now at some of the stories concerning the royal family. Let's start with the Express, if we can. And this is Queen Camilla to the rescue, the Express tells us.
I mean, so it's not been an easy time for the royal family, to state the obvious. The King, deeply unwell, Kate in and out of hospital. Of course, not too long ago, the passing of both the Duke of Edinburgh and the late Queen. And our new Queen is taking up more significant duties. And the sense, as reported in the Express, is that she's taken to it like a duck to water.
She's just carrying on.
I mean, I think probably the most puzzling and problematic thing for them is that all anybody wants to know is what they don't know. So, you know, there was the whole business where an engagement was released for Kate Middleton and then it was removed from the website, and people still don't know when she's going to start making public appearances again.
It was announced that she was never coming back until after Easter. So
but that was June. That was June the 8th, and then it got taken down.
And then what I think happened was the organisation concerned, I think it was a branch of the military, had that in the pipeline for a while, and they put the wrong thing on. People are so keen to find news about the royals now that they'll spin something out of nothing. We were the last time we were on the show talking about it.
What were we talking about?
I was talking about Kate going in now, and afterwards people like poring over our remarks online, saying this might have meant this or that. Guys, I really don't know anything about Kate.
Ignoring texts from family asking me for the gossip.
That's exactly right. Friends of mine asked me, and I'm like, how
am I supposed to know?
I don't know. All right. Let's look at the front of the Daily Mail, and I don't know if there's an irony in this, that they're talking about Meghan Markle and the abuse that she suffered online. The Daily Mail, who wrote many stories that were attacking
basically, I do really feel for Meghan Markle, because in their Netflix documentary, when they just laid out the kind of abuse she got online on the socials following a negative story, which was very often in the Daily Mail, and it was very often obvious racist dog whistling, you did kind of look at it and think, that is outrageous. You know, it's like, it doesn't even matter if they weren't doing it on purpose. They should have, she should have been able to tell them that was happening and for them to stop, and they never stopped. And, you know, the story in this is that she gave the story in this speech for International Women's Day, and says the most abuse she got was when she was either pregnant or she had a newborn. And I do think that's bad.
I agree.
I do think people should be nice to you when you're pregnant.
Obviously bad, and it shouldn't happen. I disapprove of it because I disapprove of anyone being abused. I disagree with her about the worst attacks online on women being from other women. I think the worst attacks on women online are from misogynistic men. And the trouble is that I don't deny her experience, but extrapolating from one person's experience to the general, I think, is very often a mistake. And I think it's a mistake in this example. And secondly, so we agree on that. Where we disagree is, I think, no one should be abused, is the dichotomy of the Harry and Meghan desire for privacy, so strongly stated. I must insist on privacy. I must have privacy. I'm going to discuss privacy in my next 16-part documentary on Netflix discussing my private life.
And Spotify podcast, don't forget the
But listen,
I'm sorry, I forgot the latest plug.
I think the need for privacy was born out of her being relentlessly attacked. I think if the press had been really nice to her, she wouldn't have needed so much privacy.
The two things exist at the same time. Can they have wanted to have privacy because of that, but also realise that they still need to earn money, and they wanted the documentaries and the podcast series
but it's also a question of fairness and having your own corner, right? It's like the press always has the last word, unless you have the last word, and then the press accuses you of talking too much.
That's true, but the trouble is there's a difference, obviously, between abuse and reasonable questions and reasonable criticism. And once you get so used to saying, this is just abuse, I don't have to put up with this, I'm not going to listen to it, you start dismissing what are realistic or reasonable questions. Are you supportive of the family?
But a lot of the questions weren't that reasonable. You know, it's like she was ruthlessly attacked for eating avocados when Kate Middleton was allowed to eat as many avocados as she liked.
It's completely abhorrent. There's something else about this as well. It's about the online abuses. I mean, this is the thing. It's so easy. You were talking about it in the break about your mentions. It's so easy for people to attack one another online, and I don't quite know how you end up reversing that kind of horrible hole that we've fallen down as a society.
It's been a cliche for a long time that people wouldn't be as rude to you in person as they are online. My worry now is that's not the case anymore. And people are becoming more and more rude. They want to go up and scream abuse at a politician in a way that you wouldn't have in the past. And they want to go and vandalise something so that you have to put it behind glass and behind steel and behind concrete bollards and so forth. And in the end, what we've got is a worse society. What you're doing when you scream that abuse doesn't change the person's mind. Slashing up a painting in Cambridge doesn't change Israel's policy in Gaza. It just makes you unable to visit the room anymore that the painting was in, or at least to approach the painting closely. And that's the outcome.
I don't really agree. See, you're looking at it all the time, as though the kind of dishevelment in standards of courtesy online have infected real life standards, and that's why we're angry with politicians and we're slashing up paintings. But I would put to you that the standard of behaviour from politicians has taken a precipitous dip, and the reason somebody slashed up a photo of a painting of Balfour is very, very obvious.
OK, I can't let you come in, unfortunately, so we have final word. But look, you're going to stick around, right? You'll get a chance to say something else, Alex. So thanks both very much. Let's take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go.
To fly
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The weather will turn more unsettled and showery this weekend with a brisk easterly wind, making it feel quite chilly. Saturday morning will start breezy and mostly cloudy with spots of drizzle in the northeast and outbreaks of showery rain in parts of England and Wales.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.